They hung the golden rose balloon arch in the community hall's foyer as if it were a crown. And my name was missing from the place cards fanned across the reception table like a deck cut in full view. 2 cameras on flimsy tripods pointed at the entrance. Red tally lights winking. While the air conditioning thudded and stuttered against a Karachi October that hadn't decided whether to yield. I stood at the threshold with a sealed envelope in my bag, the edge of it pressed against my palm whenever I flexed my fingers. The ink already dry, the notary stamp raised like a coin. A soft floral fog from the spray roses mixed with the hall's citrus cleaner. In the next minutes you'll see how a birthday canopy, a missing card, and a single reversed line in a bank log can redraw a family map. The coordinator, Lila, smoothed the tablecloth with both hands until it stopped whispering. She glanced up, recognized me, and then looked beyond me toward the driveway where the cars were nosing in, one after another. Her earrings caught the light, and in the white bounce her eyes cooled. I'd met her on Monday, when I signed the vendor's intake clipboard and paid for the caterer's second installment by card from the budget I built, spreadsheet tight. That day she'd addressed me as Mrs. Malik with the unconcern of a person whose job is to make lists obey. Tonight she worked her way along the place cards and stopped when she got to the head table. There were 6 cards there, a family block like a dam. I found my own name in the rows and rows of cousins and colleagues, and then, no, I didn't. I traced my finger along the alphabetized columns anyway. Because sometimes you have to let your hand confirm what your eyes already know. I stepped forward into the cool air of the hall. A boy from the AV team, parrot green cable looped over his shoulder, requested that I keep the doorway clear. His breath smelled of mint gum, and he didn't look at me when he said it. The neon script sign, Shanaz at 60, sparked twice and settled. The word Shanaz brighter than the numbers, as if the glass itself had chosen sides. On the welcome easel, a photo of my mother-in-law in a mauve, sari, held court. She'd chosen an image from the years when she chaired everything. Under the photo, a QR code promised a digital guestbook. I watched someone scan it. My own name was preemptively absent there, too, because absence is quick when it's practiced. My husband, Adil, was late. The last text he sent was an unreliable promise. 5 mins paired with a photo of a traffic not on Kayabana Baria that told me he'd be longer. In that little photo, the car mirrors glittered like fish scales. I could smell the heat hanging off the asphalt. I texted him a single period and got the typing dots, then nothing. In my bag, the envelope slid against the lining. And the corner of a printed seating chart, the manager's copy, with notes in my own block letters, tickled my wrist. I had highlighted a line for stage program speech order, a small yellow beam that would matter later. The first shock in a story like this is never the loudest thing in the room. It's the sticky glass of water that refuses to sweat, even in the against it cold. It's the way a microphone hums just off key in a frequency your bones don't forget. It was the woman at the table who avoided my eyes like I was a transaction gone sideways. It was the crest of perfume that rolled over the foyer when my mother-in-law herself arrived, flanked by 2 aunties who halfway waved at me and then converted the gesture into a tug on somebody's sleeve. It was Shanice's glance, rehearsed and brief, and the way she turned her cheek to be kissed so that I would have to reach farther than was polite if I wished to try. "Registration is just there," Lila said to a couple behind me, and then, without moving her lips, to me. "We discussed this." We had discussed nothing. She had recited. On Tuesday, when I delivered the signed AV addendum, she'd read from a script that lives in the middle tier of customer service. The family will select the final seating configuration on the event day. But we encourage suggestions. The word family had the shape of a fence. I'm fluent in those shapes. I'd spent a decade as an operations analyst, first for a logistics firm and then for a payments gateway. I track processes the way a hiker tracks switchback scout. Breathe, crest, repeat and. In my world, a script is a map with hazards circled. I'd flagged the hazard then. I flag again now. The place cards, the microscript, the manager's copy of the seating chart with my highlights. A contact in my phone saved only as V. A locked drawer in a deal study I hadn't tried to open since a certain August. These were all loops opened quietly within me. The envelope, the bank log, the contract's clauses, they were the levers I had lined up. Seems I'm not family after all. I heard myself think it like a line I had rehearsed on walks between my building and the chai stand, the cup warming my palm until my fingers remembered why they exist. The hall had the echo of a place that is used to announcements. A quartet at the back tuned their instruments in fragments, an A string, then a skitter on the bow, then the whisper of a cloth polishing a bridge. The caterers laid out trays of miniature kebabs, the aroma of char and cumin sliding under the floral spray like a hand beneath silk. A child skidded by in socks and got scooped up by a cousin. A news anchor would call this the scene. The held breath inside it was mine. Adil found me, finally, guilt rolling off him in waves like the heat off the generator out back. He touched my elbow and looked at the cards arranged in their grid. He didn't ask. He knew. Someone had told him, or he had heard about it, or he had glimpsed the email that pretended to be about something else. I took a breath and watched the air turn nothing, and the little hairs on my forearm lifted because the AC. When it kicked, always overreached before it steadied. "Let's go to the prep room," he said. Low. "If I step away from the table now," I said, "it acquiesces to something." He swallowed. "My mother asked that you not be at the head table. And the other tables are full," he said, and flinched at his own choice. "Not assigned. Not considered full." I didn't ask what she had said about why. I know the money language we speak in this family, not how much, but who gives. I funded the deposit and the second installment because Adil and I had agreed. In a series of cheerful, spreadsheet-accompanied living room talks, that this was part of building equity in perception. His mother preferred deference packaged as invisibility. I had offered a different shape. She had accepted the money and left the shape. The first time I suspected something was sliding toward this evening was a month ago when I found an email from V. Adil had left his laptop open, which he usually didn't. The subject line was plain, invoice package. The body had one line beneath a shared folder link. As discussed, we'll handle placing and final guest flow. Please ask S not to involve herself toward the end. It confuses staff. Most people don't read punctuation as a map. I do. The semicolon told me it had been written by someone who believed in tidy rooms. The letter V told me the person preferred options. I didn't click. The hardware recognized my restraint with a hum that stayed neutral. Later, when Adil was slicing mangoes, I asked casually, "Who is V?" and watched him cut once through flesh and once into wood because a lie. Even a small one makes you misjudge where your hand is. I told myself a story then, that V was a vendor, that maybe they had a system. I was a system person. But language moves like money. It leaves residue in its ledger lines. We'll handle placing snagged. I am not built for tantrums. I am built for receipts. So when I paid the second installment and got a merchant email that took 2 seconds too long to arrive and then arrived with a typo in my name where there had never been one, I flagged it. When I called the bank to ensure the merchant category code matched the contract, I took notes on a yellow legal pad. When the bank manager, Mr. Chowdhury, said, "If there is a dispute, we follow the scheme and the evidence." The network codes differ slightly across issuers, but reason maps are similar. I underlined reason maps. He told me to keep everything. I keep everything. That week, I went to the venue for a walkthrough and asked, Leela, the kinds of questions that make vendors watch their pronouns. When you process final seating cards, who approves the head table? And if there's a speech order change, who signs? She said, "We work to the family's wishes." It shouldn't have sounded like closing a door, but it did. I signed the AV addendum and watched her stamp received on it, the ink squeaking against the glossy counter. The envelope in my bag now contained a notarized copy of the merchant contract, my bank's acknowledgement of the second installment, and a letter that I'd drafted in my slow, steady hand, a notice of chargeback intent citing the card network reason code that most nearly matched. Services not provided as agreed under the event's written scope. I'd cited Clause 6. 3 seating and program control family representative. And Clause 2. 1 service consideration payments are for deliverables as described. I'd included screenshots of the venue's email confirming that Sarah will coordinate the vendor liaison because the manager had written that sentence on an evening when kindness was effortless and the stakes were low. I'd included the original PDF seating chart with my notes, and then the revised one with my notes removed. VS copy. I'd printed the bank log showing the timestamp, the approval code, and the authorization. I'd attached a copy of the recorded call transcript with Lila where she had said the family will handle placing. The notary had watched me sign the letter, sealed it, and pressed her stamp until I could feel the embossed ridges through the paper, a topography of being sure. In the hallway outside the prep room, a cousin I liked, Nadia, reached for my hand and then changed her mind midair, smoothing her hair instead. "Sorry about the mix-up," she murmured, as if a mix-up were a weather event that had drifted in like fog. "You look beautiful." She was trying hard. Her perfume had a vanilla base. In this air, it meant cake later and somebody's laugh a little too loud. On the stage, a host tapped the mic and the thud moved through the hall's bones. The quartet had shifted to a velvet background of something modern pretending to be classical. Shanaz was all mauve and lacquer. Her smile wide and then narrow and then wide again as she turned toward people who wanted to be near what she had built. She had been a principal, a board member, a chair. Her wrists were bangles of accomplishment that chimed when she lifted them. She knew the choreography of being necessary. I admired it when it wasn't trained on me. "Come," Adil said again. "Please." I stood long enough to count the candles on the head table's arrangements. 40 on each end, tapering down, the effect a controlled blaze. It smelled like something new trying to remember tradition. In the program I'd designed, there was a slide that would come up after the first speech, acknowledgments. My name on it had felt like a pin I let myself wear. I'd learned in operations that acknowledgments are currency. When you can't eat it, you can trade it. I'd placed it neutrally near the bottom. I'd left out my last name to make it easier to swallow. On Wednesday, that slide had been replaced, no text. Just a photo of Shanaz's charity banner. The file name of the new slide had included _final3_V, which was how I learned to tighten my jaw without clenching. People leave their initials in their edits like footprints in wet cement when they are sure they'll never be read. The doors opened, the hum rose, and with it the ambient temperature by a degree. A waiter carrying a tray of lemon water passed, the slices thin enough that they were translucent, the rinds like halos. I took one and the glass fogged instantly. It left a little wet ring on the welcome table when I set it down, a ring that said, "I was here." Lila gestured to the registrar to begin, and a small line formed. The guests dropped their gifts into a gold-and glass box with a slit for envelopes. The sound of cards against glass, a shiver. I thumbed my own envelope and imagined slipping it into that box. Imagine the clerk at the bank, a woman named Nora who worked card disputes, lifting it months from now with the detached expertise of someone who knows that weddings and birthdays are where finance and feeling become indistinguishable. I didn't wait months. I slid the envelope under the manager's copy of the seating chart on the registration table and angled it so that the embossed notary seal caught the recessed light. It looked like a minor decoration. The envelope was addressed to Event Manager, CC Account Manager. Inside, the letter said that unless a corrective, action was taken immediately to restore the agreed service. My role as liaison and the seating as described. I would file for a chargeback for the unpaid portion and initiate a fraud review on the already cleared installment because the material misrepresentation prevented me from making an informed authorization at the time of payment. The letter cited the recording, the emails, the contract, the program slide, the list of deliverables, the food, and a V details. It copied the bank manager and the disputes analyst. It was, in tone, a calm door closing. Adil watched me do it. He didn't stop me. The flutter in his throat said he was choosing twice, not to block, not to endorse. Neutral is sometimes the only posture a son can manage. When the scaffolding he was raised under is made of obligations welded to gratitude, Lila didn't notice the envelope immediately. She was troubleshooting a cable. When she did, she didn't open it. She recognized the language of certified paper. She took it to the back, and the doorway swallowed her. I had 10 minutes. I used them. I pulled out my phone and opened my bank app and navigated to disputes. I uploaded the PDFs, each named with humanity's care, 01_contract_notarized. To _email_confirmation_Sarah_liaison. 3_AV_addendum_receive stamped. For _program_slide_version history. 5_call_transcript_Lila_seating_placing. 6_banklog_authcode_timestamp. 7_seating chart_manager copy_initials. 8_seating chart_revised_version_V. 9_refund policy_venue. 10_courier receipt. For each, I typed a caption in one sentence precise enough to be credible if read aloud in a courtroom. I selected the reason code recommended by Nora when we'd spoken earlier that afternoon, services not provided as described. Misrepresentation and cited clause 6.3. I hit submit and the little circle spun and then became a check. The app generated a case number, KHI 7421213.5. The May 13 wasn't the code. But the accident made me smile quietly. It looked like a standard. The AC blew a cold stream across my ankles, and I fought the urge to shiver in a dress that had been chosen to look like belonging. I stepped into the prep room. The smell shifted garam masala and hairspray, hot irons and starch. The space had those cheap collapsible chairs that buckle if you sit wrong. On the counter, lipsticks in a gradient from coral to plum stood like little soldiers. Shanaz sat at the mirror with a makeup artist dusting highlighter along her cheekbones, turning her into a softer version of the chairwoman she was. Auntie Farida dabbed at the corners of her own eyes with a tissue for show. She liked to be seen feeling. Shanaz caught my reflection and considered me like a promising junior staffer late to a prep meeting. She didn't invite me to sit. She didn't have to. I received a letter, she said, polite, as if we were at a charity board review. Something legal sounding. I sent it. It isn't a threat. It's a timeline. You would spoil this evening. You already changed it, I said. You just did it in the quiet way that makes people think events run themselves. She smiled slow. Family matters shouldn't be escalated to banks. Family matters shouldn't be invoiced to me while you erase me from scope. I said, my voice even, my hands still. Palms cool from the lemon-glass condensation I'd wiped into my skirt without even knowing. I won't shout. I'll use process and receipts. You wouldn't do this if you understood our customs? I understand contracts, I said. And respect. One of the aunties made a small sound that could have been a prayer or a laugh. Adil hovered and then found a corner. His reflection in the mirror was a man replaying childhood scripts he'd promised himself he'd retire. The makeup artist stepped back and shook glitter from a brush. The air smelled faintly of talc and rose. A fan ticked slowly, a lazy metronome for a conversation that had moved into a rhythm I'd studied. Claim, counterclaim, cite, consequence. You'll embarrass yourself. Shanaz said softly, almost kind. People will talk for months. People were going to talk anyway, I said. They'll just talk with better data. Her mouth flattened just slightly. She had spent a lifetime coaching tone into a weapon you can serve with tea. I'm offering you a quieter path, I said. Put my name back on the program. Restore the head table seat. Acknowledge the coordination work I did. Or the bank will perform the audit for me, and the venue will reverse charges they're counting. My letter freezes the settlement until resolution. The manager's copy is already stamped and dated. You can collect the envelope, or you can let the process proceed. You'd bring outsiders into our house, she said. You brought a vendor who signed a contract, I said. You brought a network that processes money. Outsiders live in here already. They just wear neutral lanyards. The door opened and Lila appeared, manager behind her, both reading my letter again as if second reading could turn letterhead into lace. The manager, tall woman named Sheba who'd worn sneakers to the walkthrough and had impressed me with her refusal to pretend guests are light, cleared her throat. "Ma'am," she said to Shanaz, "we'll need to restore the original program order or provide a written deviation signed by the paying party with date and time. Without it, we risk a dispute hold and then a reverse settlement. The bank has already notified us of an initiated case number." She looked at me without looking grateful. I liked her more for that. We're on a clock. The sound system outside switched to a classic film song that made the elders smile and the teens roll their eyes. The chord progression twined through the thin door like memory. I could feel the vibration of it in the metal threshold plate under my heel. "This is my evening," Shana said. The words were not pleading. They were reminding the air. "It can still be yours," I said. "It just can't be built out of me." For a second, I wanted to touch her hand because I knew the way the world looked from her chair. How often you trade softness for agency. How often you negotiate yourself smaller so a committee looks bigger. But she had weaponized that trade in a new generation. And my hands knew what to hold now. The sealed envelope's absence from my bag felt like a choice made. Not a chance lost. The show cannot idle long, not when food warms and ice sweats. Decisions arrived. The manager looked at Lila. Lila looked at Shanaz. The aunties looked at one another. Adil looked at me. I looked at the line of lipsticks and thought about the locked drawer back home and the little key I'd found by accident inside an old planner's pocket the day I'd cleaned a shelf in August. And how I hadn't used it because trust is a muscle you exercise by letting doors stay shut. That was another loop. Some loops can be left open without bleeding. Shanaz's bangle chimed once when she lifted her hand. "Do what she wants," she said to Lila, "for tonight." The words were not a surrender. They were a stay. She had calculated a settlement reversal would cost her not only this evening's tidy, but the reputation. Coin, she values most competence. People like her keep ledgers in their heads where the currency is control. A pause now could be booked a strategy later. I knew this math. I built a life in cells and formulas. I accepted the temporary fix not because I was cowed, but because a stay can be a hinge if you install it correctly. The heat outside the prep room hit me like opening an oven. The hall appeared both smaller and larger at once, the trick of a space right before a program starts. The quartet packed away. The MC adjusted his jacket and rehearsed a joke with his hands. The neon script blinked bright again. Sheba walked with me to the registration table, pulled the manager's copy of the seating chart to the top, and wrote my name in block letters at the head table with a pen that squeaked. Faintly on the glossy cardstock, Sarah Malik. The sound was a tiny, satisfying tear in a fabric that had been falsely seamless. Lila put the acknowledgement slide back into the deck like she was palming a card. We tested it. It sat there, unremarkable, waiting to be the thing it should have been. The bottled water was cold enough that it made my teeth ache. I took a sip anyway. Adil stood beside me, weight on his heels. These were the moments you want to file away under normal, even as you feel how not normal they are. The warm electric smell from the DJ's power strip. The exact throw of light across the first row of tables. The way a child's balloon squeak can sound like the beginning of failure or laughter. The MC began. The speeches started. The first one was an uncle's. He took too long and didn't say much. The second one was the cousin who had done media training. She said just enough and smiled with her eyes. Then Adil spoke, and his voice steadied as he progressed from childhood mischief, anecdotes, to the kind of praise that tries to be honest about complex love. He didn't mention me. He didn't need to. I didn't need him to be brave on mic when he was trying to survive off it. Then my turn. The presence of my name on the program was modest, but there. The neon script behind me, humming faintly like a bee. I walked to the stage and the room resized physically. Postures adjusted. Back muscles lifted or slumped, depending on what the listener believed I deserved. The community hall had a mystery in its rafters, a smell of old basil that had lived through 1,000 dinners. I placed my notes on the lectern. I don't like to read. I like to prove. I coordinated with vendors and staff, I said. And I want to thank them by name because events like this are built from people who show up and do exactly what they said they would. I named the caterer, the quartet, the AV tech, the coordinator, the manager. And I want to thank Shanae, I said, and I meant it. My voice carried that truth across the room. She taught me how to document whether she knows it or not. There were polite laughs, then actual ones, then silence of the kind that holds a shape. I hope this evening reflects the love in the room and the respect we owe one another. I looked at my mother-in-law. She kept her face dignified, which is a cousin of kind. She took it, added it to a ledger, and made no withdrawals yet. I did not say anything about money. I did not mention the letter. I let the bank do that invisible work. Competence lets process carry the awkward loads. The cake appeared, 3 tiers, mauve and gold leaf. The smallest top tier, a little greedy. The candles were lit with a wand. The smell of wax warmed and was knocked back by the cold air. The song rose first thin, then thick with the sound of 100 people doing something simple together. The cameras blinked their red lights. I cut slices with the other hands in the family. I passed plates. A cousin brushed my fingers and squeezed them once. An apology or an ICU, I couldn't tell. Sometimes it's enough not to know. The evening ran smoother after that. Once a machine is calibrated, it honors the adjustment. People danced gently, as if they had signed a behavioral rider. Photographers moved like house cats. The light from the chandeliers softened at 9, and the staff dimmed the side sconces to give the illusion of wonder. My phone buzzed twice. Mr. Chowdhury had acknowledged receipt. Nora had accepted the dispute documents. In the app, the case changed status to under review, and the text beneath it read, "Settlement hold executed." It landed in my chest like a stamp on paper, present, firm, sufficient for now. Later, after most of the photos and the orchestrated goodbyes, after the aunties had switched to flats and the uncles had loosened their collars and the last tray had rolled back through the swinging kitchen door with the squeaking porthole window, I walked the perimeter of the hall. I checked the AV rack, the hum steady, the little green LEDs marching. I checked the guest book, QR code entries blooming in real time. Beautiful evening. Schla. Food was perfect. And then, tucked between them, one line from a number I didn't recognize. Respect is a deliverable. I took a screenshot, added it to the folder in my phone named Settled, and felt the way the cool air met the heat still trapped in the carpet and made a truce in my ankles. The envelope's absence had done its work. In the aftermath, there were ripples. The next day, the manager emailed me and Shanaz a proposed event role clarification addendum for future bookings. It listed liaison authority in clean bullets that I didn't need to read, but did anyway because witnessing correctness is one of my pleasures. Lila sent me a neutral text with a copy of the acknowledgement slide for your records. Nora called and said we've executed the hold. Please forward any new communications. If they provide a signed deviation, we'll review it, but from what I see, your documentation is tight. Her voice had the board expertise of a person who has seen too many families run money through hope. She used the word tight like a signature. Mr. Chowdhury wrote a concise note. KCK HI 74212213, 5 logged. Process will follow scheme timelines. You've complied with all asks. In the family sphere, the policy changes were quieter. The WhatsApp group changed its display photo from the mauve invite to a candid of Shanaz, laughing with lemon cake on her lip. Humanization as revision control. 2 aunties called me with recipes. They insisted I must know now that you are proper edge of family, which was not grammar but was intent. A charity board member told me at chai weeks later that Shanaz had mentioned a clever girl in the family who knows documents. It was almost a compliment, and I accepted it like a handshake. She still needed to practice. Adil and I sat in our living room with the windows open to let in the night sounds, the motorbikes, the periodic dog chorus, the far-off thud of someone's baseline. He watched me label folders and file scans. He apologized in the way men do when they are trying to apologize simultaneously to two parties. No party gets everything. And the words sit between us like dominoes. That can be tapped into a cascade or left standing for decor. I told him the only letter I needed from him was a small whine-an, I sturdy and present. He nodded. That letter went into his pocket. We didn't open the locked drawer. I let trust be a door that can remain closed and still be part of a house. Not all ripples are neat. A week after the party, I received a message from a number saved in my phone as V, though I had never put the letter there myself. A deal had done it, and the cloud had made it ours. It said, "Next time, intervene earlier. Less friction." I stared at it, the way one studies a scraped knee to decide whether it is a story or a scab. I wrote back, "Next time, a line scope." Then, because I am me, I forwarded the exchange to Nora. She filed it beneath a line that read post-event communications and gave it a timestamp, like a benediction. 3 weeks later, a policy update slid across the venue's website for events with multiple stakeholders. A single documented liaison will be recognized for all decisions regarding program and seating. Deviations require co-signature from paying parties. It was cold language. It was the kind that keeps carpets clean. There were quiet apologies. Not always from mouths. From logistics. From who stood where and who asked first. And who remembered to copy me on an email to the caterer for someone else's engagement. It looked small. Small is how systems change in houses like this. You don't declare. You configure. I saw Shanaz at breakfast one Sunday, weeks after, in a kitchen clean enough to gleam. She poured tea and did not hand it to me. She set it on the table and I picked it up. That's a choreography you learn not to misread. We talked about the charity's next fundraiser. I offered a spreadsheet template for in-kind donations that had better columns. She didn't say thank you. She used it the next day. Sometimes acceptance arrives documented. At night, when the city cooled enough that the sea could be heard under the cars, I walked the block with my neighbor Imran, who liked to talk about audit trails the way some men talk about football. He asked for the case number purely for the joy of imagining its life inside a system. And I said it aloud, and the numbers matched the rhythm of our steps. Across the street, a child let go of a balloon's ribbon and then laughed at the loss. The way you laugh when you have never had to keep ledgers? We watched it lift and then disappear into the sodium streetlight halo. A breeze, marine and faintly metallic, slipped between the buildings and made the hair at my neck shift. Sometimes the city draws a line under a day for you. You just sign. I printed the confirmation from the bank when the dispute settled. Merchant issued partial credit. Case closed. Settlement came with a line that said, "Blunt. Service delivered with modification per signed agreement." That meant the addendum had arrived. Countersigned. Served. Recorded. The audit trail showed the steps. Sent. Received. Acknowledged. Executed. The credit hit. The numbers incremented. The ledger closed its little mouth around a decimal point. In the folder names settled, I dropped a photo from the community hall me at the lectern. Neon script warm behind my shoulder, my mouth mid-syllable, eyes steady. I filed the photo between PDFs like a human page break. There were days I wanted to burn the whole thing down. That is not the flame I know how to tend. I do bonfires of paper. I sever, rescind, revoke. I know how to freeze a payment and thaw it only when terms remember themselves. I know how to write letters that feel like checks and letters that feel like walls. I know how to notarize a promise so that even if the person forgets, the process remembers. You might think the ending of a story like this is the head table chair and the acknowledgement slide and the settlement hold. That was just the visible part of something larger that recalibrated a house's gravity. Changes showed up in whispers. Keys surrendered without theater when timing called for it. Codes revoked and reissued as if it were a software update. An aunt who had practiced disinviting like an art form adding me to a planning group without comment. A nephew asking me to teach him how to keep receipts like spy movie aunties. I printed him a checklist's template and showed him how to name files in a way the future respects. I ran into Lila at a different event months later. She pretended not to recognize me, and then, when I greeted her, smiled with her mouth. "We updated our scripts," she said, "which is the same as a confession if you work where scripts are sacred. It's smoother now." She looked relieved. She had not wanted to be the villain in a story whose villain was never the staff, but the physics of who pays and who is permitted. I stopped by the community hall once during daylight when it was empty. The neon sign slept dark above the stage. The room smelled of dust and faint time from something that had spilled and been wiped. The AC was off. A fly ticked against a high window. I stood where the lectern had been and closed my eyes. The silence had a grain to it, like wood. I placed my hand on the imaginary rectangle of an envelope and pictured the notary seal's ribs again. Evidence you can feel is the kind I keep. The family will always have its ropes and nets and clever hands. I have my own language that holds, signatures that mean clocks that start when I say now. The difference between revenge and justice is paperwork. On a gray Thursday that felt like a Tuesday, Shanaz called. Her voice was gentler than the tea kettle it rose over. "The school is honoring me next month," she said. "They want a slideshow." "I can help," I said. "I expect that," she said. We exchanged two breaths that didn't quite align and then did. The slideshow we built together, she chose photos with better stories than mine. I sequenced them with rhythm she could feel started with a line, suggested for her title Slide, built on work and people. She nodded when she saw it. She didn't credit me in the program. I didn't care. On the night of that event, in a different hall with different chandeliers and a smell of lemon polish and new varnish, she introduced me to someone as Sarah, who knows how to make a plan. It was not a declaration of love. It was a functional truth. That's a kind of kinship I can live with. We ended that evening in our apartment with windows open to a city that does not sleep so much as shift. I made tea. Adil cut mangoes with steady hands that avoid wood now. I slid the little key I had found back in August into a ceramic bowl by the door, where we keep keys we don't use but like to touch because they remind us that doors open and close as part of their job. The extraordinary thing is not the movement but the decision to turn. I didn't need the head table to sit where I am. I needed the map to match the territory and the invoice to match the service, and the family to match the contract it signed. When it said we, some nights I walked the dog 3 streets over and practiced the line in my head with a different ending. And then I let it go because sometimes the line has already done its work and what remains is the living with. On the way back from one of those walks, I passed the community hall again, lights off. A single security guard dozing in a chair. A pepper tree shed a scent like memory, green and quietly insistent. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A message from Nora closing the loop formally. Case settled. Merchant complied. A good sentence, short and felt. I slid the phone away and let the breeze push it out of my shoulders. And yes, there are still nights when I hear the microscript. We'll handle placing. It's like an invisible hand trying to move me. It's as if I'm a pawn. It's useful to remember what's useful, that pawns reach the end of the board and change. I straighten my spine and feel the seat under many seat accept me with the inevitability of a chair built to hold a human because the designer complied with the simple realities of weight and height and gravity. It's not majesty. It's compliance with truth. Seems I'm not family after all. When I say it now, it doesn't wilt me. It just reminds me that family, like any term in a contract, requires definitions negotiated in good faith. My definition includes chairs, names on slides, and the right to say, I paid. I decide. Hers includes bangles that chime and a ledger, with a conservative column for change. Between us is a table. On it are documents. Around it are people. Above it, a light that can be adjusted with a dimmer when the conversation runs long. If you've ever been erased politely, you know the low, steady anger that follows you, like a shadow that has learned to pace your breath. I am perhaps the least dramatic person in any room I enter. It has turned out to be an advantage. In a world of crescendos, I am a metronome. Time me, and I'll show you how long it takes to file, serve, execute, notarize, record, freeze, audit, redact, timestamp, certify, witness, countersign, escalate, cite, and comply. It is not violent. It is exact. The balloon arch is probably in someone's storeroom now, half deflated, pink gone chalky, gold dimmed. We are our storerooms, the items we keep because we might need them. On a night someone decides that they make the guest list and the ledger and the law. I keep envelopes. I keep stamps. I keep the names of people who say, we'll handle placing like they're reciting physics. I keep the names of people who answer calls at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. Managers, analysts, notaries, coordinators. I keep one more name than I used to, mine. If this story made you feel less alone, pass it to the one person who needs the reminder that quiet receipts can move mountains. And if you want more dignified justice stories like this, follow and share. Someone out there is waiting for the map.